back to the Tabernacle podcast. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Sarah, and today we'll be talking to Brenda, who's a member of the Nazarene Church and who works on staff here at Danvers Church of the Nazarene.
Our last episode featured Natani, who is our office manager, and if you haven't watched or listened yet, you should definitely check it out.
Ish, who is Natani's husband, interviewed with us last time talking about what it's like being raised as a Jehovah's Witness and his experience now becoming a Nazarene church member.
Okay, let's get started. Thank you, Brenda, for coming on today. Before we begin, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. It's actually really awkward to be on this side of the camera. I have the feeling that people saw me way too much, so I started doing voiceovers and kind of removing my face from everything. So yeah, it's a little weird to be back here, and it's probably going to be weird when I have to edit it later. But I am the creative admin for DCN, and I absolutely love it. I love the church family. And yeah, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, so our first question is, what brought you to DCN?
I was born. So that's the short of it. My grandparents came over here from Canada when my mom was 3. The Nazarene Church was actually in Peabody then, so we were there. And then when I turned 2, we broke ground here in 1985. And so we've been Danvers Church of the Nazarene ever since, and we've been here pretty much the whole time. I worked here one time before, and it didn't really end up going well. The pastor at the time wanted a carbon copy of himself, and I'm not that. I just couldn't be that. And so after 3.5 years, we parted ways. I finished out serving that quarter here, and then I left, and I tried churches in my area. I tried churches down here. Nothing really fit, and nothing really felt the same. And so, you know, when you grow up somewhere, that's your home. And so after about a year or so, I got notification that he had left the church, and I struggled with like how long is appropriate, because I missed my home. Like, I just stopped going altogether because I couldn't find one that just fit. And so I was like, how long is appropriate before I start making it look shady? And then I thought, no, you know what? I miss my church. I want to go home. So I did. And I walked through the doors, and Pastor Elisha was the first person to just be like, open his arms and be like, welcome home. And one of the teens was like, are you back? And I was like, yes. And he's like back? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, oh, thank God we need you. And I was like, and it was just like nothing had ever happened. And I share that not as a disparaging thing. I don't share that as a negative thing. You know, I saw him a couple of weeks ago, hugged, how you doing, and everything like that. But having a home church and then being away from that was really, really hard for me. And so coming back to DCN, where my family is, my home is, it just felt right. And so I was born here, I was raised here, I got married here, I have my kids here, I work here, and God willing, I will die here and have my funeral here, because this is where I belong. And I think it's really important to be where God puts you, where he calls you to be, even if there's speed bumps along the way. So of my 40 years, I have been in this church all but 2 of them for college, and then that 1 year I took off. So this is my home, and I'm happy to stay here.
That's a really great story, and I can certainly relate to that as well. DCN really does feel very homey. Yeah. And I remember when my family first moved out to Massachusetts, we visited a whole lot of other churches, and until we found DCN, we also never felt at home.
Yeah, like that connected, settled feeling. It's like, okay, this is right. Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing about family, you know, your church family, having your family here. You know, we've had situations where everyone's like, no, well, you guys are all busy on staff. Like, no, you're family. Like, we are together here. So if you have something you need, like, reach out to us. It's not, you're not bothering us. Like, you're family. And I know that's a word that we use a lot here, but it's so, I'm not going to say the word right, but applicable to DCN.
Yes, I agree. As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up, and why?
So when I was 10, I decided that I wanted to be an archaeologist. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. I absolutely love it. I wanted to be an anthropologist. I had changed my major over to that. I just like to collect dead things. So I've got megalodon teeth. I've got Bigfoot casting for prints of him and Yeti. I have a Spinosaurus tooth. So like, I love those old things. And it's like to hold on to something and be like, wow, this was swimming around like a couple million years ago. That's crazy. So I wanted to be in that field, digging in the sands, like in Egypt when I was a kid, because I just absolutely am fascinated by history. And it didn't turn out that way, but God has a plan, right? God has a plan.
Yes, and sometimes the things that we think we want to do don't end up working out, but it all works together for good.
It does, and it's a fun thing, and we can share all the weird things we collect with people, and they're great conversation starters because people are like, why do you have that? And I'm like, because I love it. Like, it's fascinating, right? Like, so yeah, God has plans and they may not be ours, and that's okay.
It's a Friday night after a busy week. How do you spend it?
In bed. Like just in bed. First, I can't do busy, which we'll get to in a minute. But if I am, Friday night, you can usually find me in bed, or it's my one night to go with my friend to the mall with the kids to let them run around and play. So it's either or, bed or mall, sitting around. So
if your life was a documentary, what would be your favorite scene?
All right. So I would say, okay, if my life was a documentary, I think for a normal thing here would be more of a story arc of when I met my husband. I met my husband when we were 22. I worked with his sister, and I had a 2-year-old. And everything I knew about him was he doesn't do people, and he just sits there, doesn't talk, doesn't want to get married, doesn't want kids. Like, that's it. And for whatever reason, I was just like, hey, sent him a message and never expected him to write back, and he did. So we talked literally every day. So everything I knew of him was not my experience with him. And we talked every single day for months, and then we decided to meet in person. Being a package deal, I warned Aiden. I said to him, do not touch him. That's all I asked him to do. Do not touch him. And so he... So I gave Aiden one instruction. Do not touch him. You're going to scare him. Don't touch him. So we go. Of course, Aiden falls asleep on the way. So I knock on his door with a toddler on my shoulder. And I'm just like, hey. So we go to my house and we put on Pirates of the Caribbean. And what is the first thing that my son does? Runs, books it to Ron, jumps up on his lap, and sat there for the whole movie. I was horrified. I thought, that's it. He scared him. Like, that's all. But Ron was he was fine with it. And that's just from that first time they met. That's how it's been. When we decided to get married, actually before that, Aiden got really attached to Ron, and that scared me because I don't want my son to ever get hurt. So I had to have a conversation with him, and I told him, you know, hey, Aiden's really attached to you, and I don't want him to get hurt. He's so young. So I think we need to kind of back it up a little bit when it comes to Aiden. And he was like, I love you and I love Aiden. And I burst into tears. And Aiden has just always been his son. Like, that's just the way it is. And when we got engaged, we went together to pick out a ring, and it was downpouring. So I put Aiden in the car because he's got his hearing aids, and I'm just like, So I shove him in his car seat, and I turn around, and Ron is on his knees in the rain, asked me to marry him. And I get in the car, and Aiden in his car seat starts going, "We're getting married. We're getting married." It was the cutest stinking thing. This little kid, 4 years old. And it was just so wonderful. And Ron, in every way, is sort of perfect for me, other than the church part, because he doesn't come. But yeah, that would be my favorite story arc, is just watching my son and my husband become father and son. But I would say my most favorite is a blooper reel of my life. So I have a hard time sometimes thinking. And so I was talking with my husband, and I don't remember the conversation, but I was like, well, Ron, after all, it does take two to clap. And he looked at me and he clapped. And then I realized, no, that's a high five when two people clap. But in that moment, I genuinely believed two people were needed to clap. And so that's one of the funny things that keeps coming up, and like, oh, remember when Mom said it takes two to clap? Or my friend's son says that, and I'm just like, the blooper reel of my life. So I would say story arc, my son and my husband, and then blooper reel would be the two to clap thing.
What is your testimony?
So I have a lot of moments in my life that God has taken care of us. But I would say probably my biggest testimony is the ongoing one that's going on in my life right now. I started literally overnight, maybe 2015, 2016. In the middle of the night, I shot out of bed, and it felt like my kidneys were shutting down. It was so painful. And that started a journey of doctors and tests and all these things. And we got me to a place where I was pretty stable, and I could maybe just need a weekend here or there to lay down. So I could pretty much function. In July of 2021, it started to get worse, where I only could work 1 day a week and then had to call out the rest of the week. August 3rd of 21, I went to work for an hour. And after that hour, I went home and I was not able to go back. So I have a list of chronic pain issues with fibromyalgia. I have ankylosing spondylitis. I've got bulging discs. I've got pretty much everything that could go wrong, arthritis, inflammation, everything. And I spent 7 weeks in bed just screaming. Like I was begging to die. We went to rapid fire doctor appointments and tests and med changes, and it was the most difficult moment of my life up until the next part. But it was really hard. And then during all of this, my son's knee started hurting, and that's nothing new. He is a sports kid, so his knee bothered him quite frequently. And normally we would wait like a week and it would get better after he rested it. This time it didn't get better. And so we made him an appointment, but I could not get out of bed that day. So we rescheduled to a different facility with a different doctor. And I was like, okay, we have to do this one. So if I need to go to something, I have to prepare for it. So I was rested. We went, and they came in with the x-ray. And, doctors have like a presence to them where they're like, there's a confidence. He was very like rounded, very wilty. And that's not usually how they react. And so right off the bat, I was a little like taken aback by the situation. So we look at the x-ray, and I'm like, I don't think bone should look like that. He says, no, and I'm concerned about the shadow. And so he's dancing around a word, like he's dancing. And so the first thing I said was, when I look at that, I think cancer. And he looked at me, and his shoulders dropped and his head cocked to the side, and he said, I don't know. So he said, I want to get him into an MRI. We scheduled the MRI for the following week. The next Wednesday, he called and said, "You're coming in 3:00. We're going to have an MRI. Forget the other one in a couple days." And I was like, okay. So I had not prepped for that because we found out at 1:00 in the afternoon. So I was in a lot of pain. And so we went down, and I'm sitting in the room. It was a 2-hour MRI. I'm like pushing on areas of my body, trying desperately to survive sitting here. And this guy walks in full scrubs, and I'm like, is that the doctor? And I text my husband, and I'm like, I think that's him. I don't know. We're going to see him tomorrow. It doesn't matter. So he goes in, he comes out, he walks over to me and puts his hand on my shoulder. Never a good sign, right? Like never a good sign. And he says, he's almost done. I just want them to go up a little higher. Don't go anywhere. I need to talk to you. And I knew. I just knew. So Aiden comes out. We go out because it's now after 5:00. So we go out, we sit in the hallway, and he said there's a mass in his femur that blew out, and that he's already made the phone call. We will be in Boston in 2 days, and we will get a biopsy done. And I'm just like, and I was like, all right. So I got the courage, and I asked him, and I was like, could this be benign? And he said, I don't want you to have false hope. Normally when it cross medias from like bone to tissue, that's not typically benign. So I text my husband, because that's what I do when I need to remember something. And I just texted the doctor's name. Don't ever do that. So he, it was my hip that cracked. So he texts me back, I don't like what I'm reading. What is this? And I was just like, I'll talk to you when I get home. So when I got home, I had a conversation with my husband. There was tears. I called my friend because I knew for my family, I needed to be strong. So I called my friend first, and I just cried. And I was like, I don't even know how I feel or anything. I called my mother next, and I never want to hear my mother wail like that again. She was back in Canada at this point. So she was stuck because this was during COVID and the border was closed. So she felt very alone and scared and not able to have reassurance. So that was hard. My dad was like, all right, we're going to just kind of see what happens. Like very much like my son takes after my dad in that sense. And, my brother, I can't repeat what he said. And then my grandparents, I waited till we knew a diagnosis. So my doctor calls me because she now has heard and patches me up as best she could. We went into Boston, had a biopsy done. It was Ewing sarcoma, which is incredibly rare and extremely aggressive. In 2 weeks, it grew 3 inches. So if we had waited another week, or if I couldn't have gotten out of bed that day, my son would not be here today. And so it was a very close call. So my doctor patched me up as best she could. The oncology team put us up in a hotel next to the hospital, so I had somewhere to lay down. And we all worked together to get through it. And then while we're doing that, my daughter struggles with mental health and has to be surrendered and committed twice during all of this. So you have my pain, my son's cancer, my daughter's mental health, and my husband, who won't say anything because he says one of us has to be okay in this family. So it was an incredibly, incredibly difficult time. I thought that I would be angry with God for my son getting cancer, or my daughter having to be in a facility and happening all at once. I thought I would be angry, but I wasn't, which surprised me. God just kept saying, trust me. And so I did, and I surrendered both of my children to God and myself, which as a mom, you put yourself last. And it's like, okay, now that they're stable, like I can start working on me to get me to a place where I'm not laying down in bed every day. And so I think that the biggest testimony of my life is the last, year and a half, 2 years, because we're all still standing. My son is cancer-free at the moment. He's had 2 three surgeries actually. He's healthy. We did get some discouraging news this week, but God's like, trust me. And so as sad as I am about some of that, I'm going to trust him. And so I think that if other people who are going through similar things, because you can say to somebody, if I say cancer, chronic pain, and mental health, everybody can identify with at least one of those, either for themselves or someone in their family. And so if one person can hear that testimony and how heavy everything was, but how we're all still afloat because God is carrying us through, then it's worth sharing that testimony. And so I hope that that's what people will feel is hopeful, that no matter what you're going through, God will carry you.
Wow, that really was an amazing testimony. We just have a few more questions. How does Ron deal with your faith?
So when we talked with Natani last time, she was the catalyst for her husband coming. And so he's involved, and he's like a forward-facing, like unofficial team member of the staff. My husband, he is a behind-the-scenes unofficial member of the staff. He actually works really well with me when we're doing video edits. He'll make suggestions and he'll help out with stuff like that. And so it's a way for him to still be, I don't know the word I'm looking for, exposed, I guess is the best way, to God, because he believes in God, but he doesn't have that relationship with him. And so he, one thing he did tell me, because he's never been church, right? And he's perfect for me in every way but that. And he said to me when we were, talking about like when we were going to have our own children, and he said, I will never stop you from taking the children to church, but I will not let you force them. And so to me, that really said, I'm going to run into problems later on, but we'll cross that bridge when it happens. And fast forward, 10, 12 years, and I finally get the real explanation of that statement, which was, if you force them, it's only going to make them run away from it farther. So even though he doesn't have that relationship, he understands my faith, and he understands why I have that faith and that relationship, and he didn't want me to push it on the kids to push them farther away, because most kids rebel, and it's not my religion, it's my mom and dad's religion. So when I thought for like 10 or 12 years that he was like, no, I'm not going to let you make them go, it was for their faith that he was saying that. He didn't want them to be pushed farther away. And so I appreciate him. I still pray one day he'll come and he'll be a part of it. But yeah, much like I do like silent partner ministry, like with the youth and stuff, he's our silent partner with the staff, and it's fun. And
I think the last question is, what is one accomplishment that people might not know about you that makes you proud?
All right, so we talked about a lot of heavy things, so I'm going to say that I'm going to go with my secret superpower here at the church. So before just creative admin, I kind of did church like office admin stuff before Natani. And so I got name plates for all the doors and put them all up. And so Pastor Elisha comes in and he's like, oh, the signs look good. So he brings up his phone and he's got like this weird leveling app on it. And he puts it up on top of it and he's like, oh, okay, that's level. So then he goes and he does this door. Oh, okay, did you have a level? And I was like, no, I don't have a fancy phone with a fancy app. I did it by eye. And so that almost became like a challenge to him. And he was like, we're doing this. So we ran around the whole church with his phone doing all of the things that I had put up. And only one of them was off by 1 degree. And he was like, your superpower is like the leveler. So we come in here, and I mean, I wish more people could see that silly side. Like, he and I are the same age. We're like 10 months apart. So he calls me his little sister, and I'm, he's my big brother. And so when we have those moments, it's like so much fun. And in his study, he had a massive map that he needed to put up, and he was like, leveler. So I come in and I'm like, all right, a little bit down here, a little bit up here. Perfect. And they stepped back and they said, nope, that is definitely not straight. So grab our fancy app. It's off 2 degrees. And I said, measure the ceiling. Ceiling is off 2 degrees. So it was, in fact, level. And so the one thing that people may not know that I am super proud of is that other than the photos in my home, I can hang things very level. So I am the church leveler.
Wow. That's weird. Really awesome.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. I like weird. We'll go with that.
Thank you so much for coming on. That was really wonderful to hear from you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me.
We want to thank Brenda for jumping in to be interviewed today.
Yeah, I've learned a lot from Brenda. I think that she's got a lot of perseverance and bravery for showing her testimony. It's never easy to share what it's been like as a Christian. It's also not easy to share through the struggles. Sometimes we think you shouldn't struggle as a Christian. Life should be perfect. But that's really not what being perfected through Christ means. So in hearing her talk about her experiences with Aiden, her son, and with her own health challenges, I know that God's working in her life, and I'm glad I get to be a part of it.
Yes, I agree. It's going to be very interesting to see where God takes this story.
Thanks, everyone, again, for listening to the Tabernacle podcast. Be sure to leave a comment below, like, subscribe, and share this with everyone who could use the testimony and encouragement that this offers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.